Hey there, Alex Kidman, and today I'm taking a look at this, the Asus TUF A14 gaming laptop. Now, Asus's TUF line is its budget gaming line, as distinct from the Republic of Gamers line, and usually with budget laptops, that means a whole lot of compromises and not quite so much fun, but that's not the story with the A14. Let's get into the review. Now, when I say budget for the TUF A14, we are not talking a super cheap laptop here. Here in Australia, the pricing starts at $2,499, so you're still spending a fair amount of money, but by gaming laptop standards, that's not that expensive, really. And you can kind of pick that the moment you pick this laptop up, because while it says 14 inches, it's relatively light, which makes it nice and portable. It's also kind of plasticky. It's not a metal body build. It doesn't feel that robust. I wouldn't thump it around that much, not that I have. And the plastic, as you can probably see, does like to pick up fingerprints too. Open it up and you're faced with a keyboard with reasonably nice travel action. I don't do a lot of gaming that involves the keyboard heavily, but if you did, I think you'd find this perfectly satisfactory. And of course, if you're looking at this as your day-to-day laptop as well, yeah, that's all going to work just fine. You're faced with a 14-inch 2560 by 1600 pixel IPS display, so not an OLED. That's another concession to the price, essentially. It's not quite as bright and sharp as a result, but again, it's fine. It works reasonably well in most conditions and reasonably quick for most gaming purposes, up to 165 Hz refresh rates, which always helps, of course, as well. Now, one other way that the cost is kept low here is that, unlike so many other gaming laptops, you're not talking RGB backlit keys, so it doesn't glow in the dark in a rainbow of colours, and honestly, I'm okay with that. I know a lot of people do love that, and if you do, then you might find that a touch disappointing, but for me, is fine. Weighing in at 1.46 kilos and measuring 31.1 by 22.7 by 1.69 centimeters, it's also nicely portable. Not, of course, the lightest or thinnest or smallest laptop you can get, but easy enough to stow into a bag if you need to carry it around or take it around with you. In terms of ports, you've got a kind of mixed set here. You've got dual USB 3.2 Type A ports, one on each side, dual USB-C, one's USB 4, one's USB 3.2, full-size HDMI 2.1, your traditional combo 3.5mm headphone and mic jack, and a micro SD card reader. I'm not so sold on the micro SD card thing there. I think it would have been a little bit nicer to have actual full-size SD because, let's face it, those adapters for micro SD are really easy to come by. You get them with pretty much any SD card you buy. But of course, a micro SD card reader can never take a full-size SD card. On the performance side, the TUF A14 is built around AMD's Ryzen A9 HX370 processor with either an 8GB NVIDIA RTX 4060 or a 6GB RTX 4050 GPU providing the graphics grunt. RAM on the model as tested was 32GB, although online research does suggest that there are some models out there with 16GB, and this is sealed RAM, so it's soldered onto the board. You cannot change it after the fact, so well worth checking what you're getting when you're buying it. On the storage front, it's equipped with a 1TB SSD, and all of this adds up to a decent performer given its asking price. Asus certainly isn't looking to undercut its Republic of Gamers brand here, but you get decent performance. And look, to show that off, I ran this through my standard set of benchmarks just to give it a kind of comparative picture against a couple of other gaming laptops and one specific laptop I've reviewed recently, and that's the ZenBook S16 OLED. Now, that is a more expensive machine, but it's actually running the same AMD processor, and it's kind of interesting to see the differences in performance there relative to the price. The ZenBook S16, of course, isn't pitched as a gaming machine at all, but it's really interesting to see what the TUF A14 does in terms of processing power, obviously helped along by the presence of that discrete NVIDIA GPU on board. On the software side, the Asus TUF A14 runs Windows 11 Home and Predictably, Asus Armoury Crate is along for the ride, but there's not a whole lot of other installed software pre-installed on the machine, which I really, really favour. Look, I get why this happens. Money changes hands. Technically, the argument is always that it makes our laptops cheaper because the money changes hands, so they charge us less. I don't know that that's entirely true. I think this is just a pure profit-making exercise, if I'm being honest with you. But ultimately, I prefer a cleaner machine that I don't have to do anything with, where I can choose what I've got on my computer. And of course, you can't properly test a gaming laptop without playing a few games on it, and here, I was perfectly happy. Now, you're not going to be able to run every AAA title at full resolution, full frame rates, everything janked up to the max, because you're not. You do have to pay more for that kind of performance, but I think for most gamers, this will be more than enough. Me being me, of course, I've played an awful lot of Earth Defense Force 6 on this, because that's my style, but gaming is a broad church. There's all sorts of things you could play on this to your taste. On the battery front, look, a 14-inch gaming laptop often has a challenge ahead of it, because gaming laptops notoriously have bad battery life to start with, because running a big heavy GPU chews up the power like nothing else. But then when you combine that with a smaller frame, you've got less space for battery capacity as well, which can make the problem worse. Asus drops a 73 watt-hour lithium-ion battery into the TUF A14, and it doesn't make any specific claims around battery life. And that's kind of smart, really, because the variable nature of gaming means that battery life can just change up so much. If you're only ever playing solitaire, that's quite different to if you're playing the latest AAA title, after all. So to get a comparative picture of the TUF A14's battery life, I ran it through my two standard battery benchmarks for laptops. So the first is just a simple video streaming test, just local video, to provide a soft figure. So this is the, if you're only using this lightly, how long might it last? A kind of best case scenario battery life figure. And then to put some contrast on that, I ran it through PC Mark X's gaming battery benchmark. Now that's a much harder test, that's much more designed to display a gaming workload, ultimately. And of course, it's one where you're only ever going to get a much smaller figure. But that gives you an acceptable kind of range, and it lets me compare against other laptops. So with that same field of laptops, how does the TUF A14 compare? The answer is quite favourably. Now, sure, you're just looking at just shy of 2 hours of simulated gaming battery life there. And look, in reality, having tested this across a bunch of games, yeah, you're probably actually going to get a bit less in a lot of circumstances if you're away from the power. But that is what gaming laptops do, and that higher figure for the video streaming test is encouraging, because it means if you are using this for lighter tasks, if you do need this as your everyday laptop that you're just going to occasionally game on, it should be more than adequate. It's, again, not quite up there with the ZenBook S, but it's so close. It does so well for what is a more powerful machine that it's actually a really pleasing battery life figure. I am slightly less pleased, however, on the charging front. So Asus uses one of its custom chargers where the plug sort of looks like it's USB-C, but it actually isn't. It is its own custom thing with a pretty chunky 200-watt charger supplied in the box. And look, that all works, and it does charge up nice and fast, because of course a 200-watt charger is going to do that. But it's quite heavy, it's bulky, it's difficult to carry around with you. It will charge, for what it's worth, off USB-C, but it will complain like crazy when it does so. Now, that is, of course, always going to be slower than the 200-watt charger, I accept that. But Windows will complain at you, and Armoury Crate will complain at you all the time you are charging. So be ready for that if you do need to top it up in an emergency. So should you buy the Asus TUF A14? Well, look, with pricing starting at $2,499 Australian, this isn't the lowest cost notebook you can buy, of course, and most notebooks can handle base level gaming these days, sort of okay. This punches a fair bit higher, and within that gaming space, I think this is a bit of a little secret bargain in a way, in its own way. You've still got to have that kind of money, of course, and if you don't, then this is never for you anyway. While the build is not as solid as it might be, the performance is there. This is actually really quite good, and my only note of caution there is that within the gaming space, there are so many bargains to be had, and it depends on what's important to you. I mean, this doesn't have an OLED screen, for example, and if you want that, you can get that, and you can sometimes get that in a discounted machine close to this kind of price. If you want a larger screen, of course, this is a smaller notebook, and again, you can shop around. But for its price, and at this point in time, Yeah, this is a nice little machine. I was much more impressed by it than I thought I was going to be. Anyway, that's my quick take on the Asus TUF A14. Got any questions? Hit me up in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe.